Hi, and welcome to what we anticipate will be our final weekly edition of the Rumblings podcast. Not ever, but for the 2022 season anyway. We'll certainly convene a podcast when there's notable events such as the Roughriders hiring an offensive coordinator, finding a quarterback, ordering new shoelaces, whatever is newsworthy around here. And as always, my worthy constituent, Dr. Murray McCormick, will be on top of it. We are going to wrap up the the 2022 CFL season, talking about the Grey Cup. But being that this is primarily a Rough Rider podcast and not a Bombers podcast or an Argo podcast, we should best address some of the issues swirling around the team as they officially enter this offseason. They need an offensive coordinator. At some point, they'll need a quarterback. They need an offensive coaching staff, save for Kelly Jeffrey. Mur, what's your read on it?
Just before we jump into this, Rob, I was out at Ryderville on Friday night, and I want to thank all the people that took time to thank us and compliment us on Rider Rumblings. I didn't get a chance to tell you this, Rob.
Oh.
But I had many people coming up saying, first off, they say my voice is recognizable, and you got the face for Rider Rumblings, so we got a mix there.
But were you buying them free beverages in return for these compliments, or was this entirely unsolicited?
Amazed. I was walking along, and there's this one scary-looking group of guys. And the guy yells out, Murray, and he comes over and he tells me how much they enjoy Rider Rumblings. And, they like our way. We have a little fun, a little banter. We provide information. We provide background on the riders they don't have. And it was just so cool to have that, because we live in a Rider Rumblings bubble, I think, Rob. We just do our jobs and we move on. But I just want to make sure we thank them, and I'm on your behalf too. And I'm sort of ambushing you with this, but I just remembered that the other day, that how many people had talked to me about Rider Rumblings, and it was such a amazing experience, and it's kind of nice to be appreciated. Speaking of appreciation,
and we do appreciate the people who've watched us so faithfully over the course of the season, which hasn't always been an enjoyable season to follow. So thank you from me as well.
So, and is the off season going to be any more enjoyable to follow? Like,
it'll be more interesting.
It's going to be more
after
interesting.
this loss after loss after loss after loss, and after just the utter hopelessness that seemed to hover over the franchise since about a lot of August, and certainly after they lost to Edmonton in mid-September. Now I think it gets interesting. Now there's some things to follow that are really going to be worthwhile, as opposed to documenting football games that the Rough Riders are destined to lose, and then writing about the most minute mathematical possibilities of them actually making the playoffs. So now I think we're looking at the construction or reconstruction of a football team, and some important components being added to it. And that's, to me, infinitely more interesting and probably constructive than whatever happened over the final 2 months of the 2022 season.
And they can't afford to lose this offseason.
No.
This is, I know there's no Grey Cup here that's moved on to Hamilton and Vancouver and but they've got to do something to regain the trust and maybe gain the respect of Rider Nation. Not saying that people I saw in Ryderville and whatnot, people still love the Riders, but they're very concerned about the direction they're headed. And boy, I think we've talked about it so much. The buzz was about who's going to be the offensive coordinator. The buzz about who's going to be the quarterback. The buzz is about what are these two guys, what are Jeremy O'Day and Craig Dickinson going to do with 1-year contracts. So there's a lot of stuff. How they're going to get better offensive linemen, how they're going to boost the receiving core. We see that Keon Schaefer-Baker's already started some workouts with NFL teams, according to 3 Down Nation. So, we'll see what happens to him, one of arguably their best receiver in 2022. So, the big question is, I guess, to start off, and I think we both listened to Craig Dickinson on Sports Cage last night, that he's kind of outlined his plans. He's going to spend the next week or so interviewing some guys, as he's asking, receiving permission for Kahari Jones. I think Mark Mueller. I'm not sure if he's received permission for. I don't have to get permission for Paul LaPolice. I did see him at the Canadian Football Hall of Fame.
Although technically he's still under contract to the Red Blacks.
Yeah, that's true. So. But I saw him at the Canadian Football Hall of Fame induction ceremonies on Sunday morning, and I said, good to see him. Am I going to see even more of you? And he kind of gave me a bit of a look. So I think Paul LaPolice has been hearing that question a lot the last little while. So it's kind of a neat reaction. There's Kelly Jeffrey, who's kind of came out of nowhere. Like, we don't really have a relationship with the coaches anymore. We don't really get to know them for some reason. It just sort of been, since COVID, we've kind of spread apart. But that one kind of surprised me. And then I look back and he was the
That
head
name
coach.
came out of nowhere.
I think it was the
Was it Mount Allison?
Mount Allison, yeah. He was the head coach there. He's a special teams coach. And maybe he has the opportunity. And I kind of think the running game, for the most part, was probably the best part of the Rider game. If you look at what Jamal Morrow did and Frankie Hickson, and even when Keenan LaFrance came in before he got hurt. So maybe there's something here with promoting from within and giving a young guy a chance that we've always sort of talked about. So Rob, they're going to have to hire an OC first. That's the first thing that's going to have to happen, because and then all the other pieces come in there.
Get Kahari Jones, get Mark Mueller, get one of those two.
Yeah,
I doubt that Paul LaPolice is going to come here, but I think that's a call that needs to be made. I think they need an offensive coordinator who is going to help them create a bit of a buzz too. I think there is got to be a bit of a public relations element to this.
But didn't Jason Moss create a buzz? I'm sorry, Jason Moss created a buzz when they hired him.
But I don't. I recall it was the morning. It was a Friday morning, and in early December of 2019, and the feedback I got at the time was a lot more "oh no" than "oh yeah."
Okay, well, I seem to remember hearing more.
People remembered the volcanic Jason Moss that they saw as the head coach of Edmonton, and there was a lot of trepidation about that right at the time, and it certainly created a discussion. I'm not sure it created the kind of positive buzz that the franchise, that the team was craving, even though I'm sure there were a lot of people who really weren't enamored of Stephen McAdoo, but I don't think that people at the time necessarily, by and large, subscribed to the notion that Jason Moss was an improvement over Stephen McAdoo, and the results certainly don't bear that out.
That's a good point. The results don't bear it out. I remember thinking that Jason Moss at the time, as the OC, he wasn't going to have that bombastic style on the sidelines. He's not in charge of everything. He's in charge of his own little world, making sure the quarterbacks. And we didn't see any blowouts from, other than a couple of little discussions.
There's a little frostiness one night in Calgary, but.
And that happens, it's not like what the Argos went through this season. When you think back to all the fights on the sidelines,
maybe that's a formula one should emulate.
I know we'll talk about that during the Grey Cup, but I thought that was the battling Argos come out on top in the Grey Cup. No one would have predicted that one. Anyway, back to the offense coordinator. So Craig, I understand, is going to be interviewing for the next week or so. Guys are going to be in and out, and then in a couple of weeks he's looking to make a decision. Mid-December-ish, I think, is what he leaned towards. He may happen sooner, may happen later, but you got to jump when the iron's hot. If you have Kahari Jones in your office and you're reading what he's doing, you're going, I think we can live with that. You got to hire him now, because there's got to be the Red Blacks might be looking for another.
Or
guy
if Mark Mueller wants to come here, get him so quickly. You don't let him get on a plane without. If there's interest there, you sign him. Like, you do that instantly.
Rob, can I ask you, I know he has no experience as an OC, and I know I'm going to throw maybe a little devil's advocate here, though. Shouldn't that be, he's got so entrenched with the Stampeders, isn't it a better way for him to get that experience with them rather than coming to a new team?
No, I don't think so. I think Mark Mueller has certainly paid his dues. He's widely respected. I think there's a great tie-in here. I don't think it's going to happen, because you talked about the situation he's in with Calgary, and that he can afford to be choosy. And I'm not sure if you can afford to be choosy, this is a situation you jump into with a lame duck head coach and a lame duck GM, or a potential lame duck head coach and lame duck GM with 1 year remaining on their contracts. I think you need to. The convention around here, at least, has been that offensive coordinators receive, or coordinators in general receive, multi-year contracts, and there would not be any contractual harmony if suddenly your offensive coordinator has more term on the contract than your head coach or GM. And I think if you're coming here too, you have to gamble that Jeremy O'Day is going to improve the offensive line at this juncture of the offensive of the offseason. You just don't know, and you don't know what you're going to have for a quarterback. So if there's a time for Mark Mueller to leave a pretty secure situation, which is difficult to find in pro football in Calgary, I don't think this is it. But if he is interested, if he is tempted, I think you get that done. And you are also, I think, looking out for the future of the franchise by bringing in one of the great young coaching prospects. Failing that, then I think there's a very compelling case to be made for Kahari Jones. He's done it. which is further to your point. You know what you're getting with Kahari Jones. He knows this community, and
he likes it here.
He likes it here.
He lives always in Dallas.
So if you can get one of those A-listers, if they are tempted to bite, I think you make sure you got that locked down before they get on the plane and leave. And I'd be totally comfortable with Mark Mueller. I think that'd be a coup for them. I think Kahari Jones would be a great hiring for them. I'm just not sure that the contractual situation here is such that it will be sufficiently tempting for one of the choice candidates. And if I'm wrong, I will certainly write that.
He's also got the best handshake in sports, eh? Doesn't he? Knows Mark Mueller.
Kahari? Or Mark? Well, Mark, yeah. I mean, he learned that from Ronnie. He learned that from Danny McManus. He was raised by or not raised, but certainly mentored by two of the best people that you could hope to be mentored by. And Mark Mueller had that handshake when he was playing minor football in grade 9, the first time I interviewed him. So
that's crazy.
That would be a wonderful story, and I think it would be a great fit, considering the Mueller ties to Regina, to Sheldon, to the University of Regina Rams, everything. That'd be perfect. But is this the time? I'm just not sure it's the best time for Mark Mueller to make that move. I think he can wait. And, Paul LaPolice is in that situation too, where he can wait. He's got a year left on his contract with the Ottawa Redblacks. He could always go to TSN and
he knocked it out of the park on TSN.
Oh, and you knew he would. So, again, I think it's Mueller, LaPolice, and Kahari Jones. If those are the best three out there. I'm not sure that they're going to get either of them, any of them, given the contractual situation, and they don't know who the quarterback's going to be, and they don't know if the offensive line is going to be any good. So why would you dive in now?
Craig's mentioned that there is some urgency in this. I think I heard it last night, or maybe I heard it in one of his other interviews, that he knows they got to move quickly. Just because of the other teams. So maybe he's already got his list, and he's already got what he might like. Probably looks like he's seen what he likes from him, what he doesn't like from him, and we'll have an off-season sooner than later. And then it goes on to the offensive line coach, which is up to wherever they get. It was funny. I heard so many guys during hanging around the stuff, offensive linemen, that really liked Steven Sorrells. They thought he was.
How was he the problem? Honestly, he was here for 5 years before this year, and there were no concerns raised. So now this team has one bad year, and they throw Steven Sorrells overboard. He didn't go from being someone who's eminently worthy of being employed here for that duration, and one that was quite successful when you look at the breadth of it, to everything's fallen apart this year, let's get rid of him. To me, that was another example, likely one that's less mentioned not as often as Cody Fajardo and Jason Moss, but that's another example of scapegoating, as was Travis Moore.
Travis Moore too, but the receivers.
You're going to find a better receivers coach than Travis Moore. Good luck with that.
Yeah,
honestly,
I think that's more. It was more the receivers falling back than Travis Moore not coaching him. I think he had that unit. They respected him. They rallied from him. We used to see him before every game eating dinner with the receivers at Memories. He did all the right things. Kean Schaefer-Baker, he worked on Braden Linius. He got all these guys. Could he have done anything with a healthier Duke Williams? I think it would have been a big difference if Duke didn't have an ankle sprain for most of the season. That would have made a bit of difference. Justin McInnes. I don't know what his future is. Yeah, kind of blah. Swerve came back. Missed half the season. Was he the Swerve of old?
Well, he didn't score a touchdown, so I would argue no.
No.
The problem that Travis Moore faced was that none of the receivers that he was coaching were even remotely as good as Travis Moore was as a player.
Mm-hmm.
Give Travis Moore a couple of Travis Moores, and everything's fine.
And one of the most personable guys in the league. As I said, we kept distance from the coaches, but he would come by, just say hi, say things, little normal interactions that seem to don't happen a lot in football anymore because of COVID and other things that are going on. Speaking of COVID, sorry.
Are you okay?
Just gonna have a little cough, folks.
Murray's been ailing for a while.
I was healthy. I was healed. And then the darn Grey Cup hit and in and out of cold weather. And I went,
you were squeaking a bit during the Grey Cup game. I was worried that you had been afflicted once again. But the thing is too, you bring in an offensive coordinator, and then you basically have to wait to see who the offensive coordinator is going to coordinate, because what really can they do to fix the offensive line until early in the new year, until there's free agency? They can announce some signings of American players. That might be tougher than normal due to the XFL and the USFL.
Yeah.
As far as the quarterbacking situation, I don't think the quarterback that can fix things here is going to shake free until February, and then we'll see what the free agency market allows the Roughriders to do, because Hamilton got the jump on the Bo Levi Mitchell sweepstakes by acquiring his negotiating rights. So they alone can talk to Bo Levi Mitchell through until the free agency window begins. So until then, what really can the Roughriders do except cross their fingers and hope and watch monitor a lot of situations that are beyond their control? I think what happens with Nathan Rourke's going to influence the Roughriders. What happens in BC? What happens with the Toronto Argonauts is going to influence the Roughriders. What if McLeod Bethel Thompson does come back? Then that's an interesting situation in Toronto, because Chad Kelly has demonstrated that he can and should play. But if McLeod Bethel Thompson decides to spend more time with his family, if Nathan Rourke goes to the National Football League, then Vernon Adams Jr. is presumably the starting quarterback in BC, not on the market. Chad Kelly is the Argos starting quarterback, not on the market. And it reduces the already shallow pool of quarterbacks that could be available to the Roughriders. So how do you fix it?
It took us 16 minutes till we mentioned Bo Levi Mitchell officially in our podcast. He was I was kind of surprised about how well loved he was during Riderville, with all the selfies and photos with Rider fans. It looked like they were doing their own sort of recruiting method to get Bo here. Now, is he coming here? I'd be shocked if he did. I think the tradition is once a guy rights get traded, it's quite often they sign with the team whose rights they have. But it was kind of neat to see all the people sort of kind of rubbing shoulders with Bo and trying to, because there's a big idea that he's very much disliked in Riderville, and I didn't see that as much. I don't know how the Grey Cup's a love, and you're not going to get in any fights or arguments or anything with people at a Grey Cup, but both seem to be attracting a fair bit of attention when he's around. And then, regardless, boy, he's the next stop for TSN. I think he just seemed to have he had everything. He had the analysis. He had the fun. He had fun with it. He seemed to have the in-depth knowledge, and boy, he can probably be the next guy up for TSN on their football analysis.
But if he's not the next guy up for the Roughriders, and he by no means is he a sure thing. There's a reason, presumably, that Calgary didn't start him for the last half of the year. Yeah. But I think he's the best of the options available. Trevor Harris is a little intriguing, though. Like, he's a free agent in February if he doesn't re-sign with Montreal, and he had a pretty solid year and has a pretty solid resume. Of the quarterbacks who are remaining after Bo Levi Mitchell, I think Trevor Harris would be the best candidate, but I think there's a lot of teams that could be in the market for him.
Isn't he 36?
He turns 37 next year, but who else is there?
Yeah, I know that's the bottom line. Is
in 2017, their best option turned out to be a 38-year-old Kevin Glenn, and that worked out pretty well. There's not even that. I think the Roughriders would be very happy if they could somehow use the open market to bring in someone who can give them what Kevin Glenn gave them in 2017, which was 25 touchdown passes, a huge leader, and it's someone who helped the team finish 10-8 and get to the playoffs. And after a couple of bad years in a row, 2.5 bad years in a row. So I'm not even sure there's a Kevin Glenn out there, or there will be a Kevin Glenn out there.
I don't know if Montreal's going to be. I think Montreal would want to hang on to him.
Well, you would think so, because if you don't retain Trevor Harris, then you're in the same boat as a number of teams across the league. Yeah. And so why wouldn't you keep what you've got? Is Trevor Harris going to end up in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame? No. Is he better than pretty much anybody who could or will enter the market? Yes. And once you look past that, it's Dane Evans. Is that going to get people excited around here? That's suddenly, Vernon Adams Jr. If Nathan Rourke surprisingly ends up in BC, there's just not a great not a great crop of quarterbacks, period. But if you don't get Trevor Harris or Bo Levi Mitchell, then you are really crossing your fingers.
As I said, I don't think they're going to go back to Cody Fajardo. I think that'd
They can't.
be almost as surprising as Bo Levi Mitchell signing here. But that you touched upon that though. What do they got else? What else do they have? What else is out there? Yeah. And I don't think Cody creates anybody. I think Cody creates probably more of a negative feeling about you're doing with what you got to go with. You're not doing anything to progress.
I mean, it would be embarrassing for the Roughriders to bring back Cody Fajardo after they benched him for 2 games left and before a game that they had to win to maintain whatever chance they had of making the playoffs.
And he has to want to.
Yeah, and why would Cody want to come back here after they embarrassed him and humiliated him, scapegoated him? I've been using that word a lot, but that's what they did to people in terms of Jason Moss, in terms of the offensive coaching staff, in terms of Cody Fajardo. And so why would he come back here? They've said the polite things about how he's, they're not ruling it out or however it was phrased. Yeah. But I mean, Cody Fajardo's not coming back here. There's just no feasible way that proceeds after what happened with 2 games left in the regular season. Actions speak more loudly than words, and we saw what their actions were.
One of the most asked questions I had during the Riderville, it wasn't, do you want another beer? It was, how did Craig Dickinson keep his job? People are still wondering how, why he was brought back as a head coach, considering everything had gone on and stuff. And you and I both feel that, 2 out of 3 years is pretty good. You don't get dump a guy for 1 bad season. He had some issue. It wasn't his fault that the offensive line was horrible. He had to somehow coach it. The receiver was a pedestrian. The defense, after that July 8th game against Ottawa, the defense kind of went all the way downhill from that, losing Marino and Lanier and those guys. So,
Pete Robertson got injured in the July 8th game against Ottawa too.
So do you put all that blame?
AC Leonard got hurt. He was playing.
That was horrible. They're trying to spin it now. I've heard more people are talking about the touchdown Atlantic as being the turning point. And for the life of me, it'll always be that July 8th game. And I know that there's a whole lot of football season left after that game. But boy, that game just decimated the Riders and set a whole lot of tones, lot of things.
Although after that, the Roughriders were leading Toronto, and then there was the pick 6 by Wynton McManus.
Yeah.
The Jazz fan in me wants to say Wynton Marsalis, but so they had they won touchdown Atlantic, they're in. Suddenly they're 5-1 instead of 4-1.
Yeah, but how many games could we say if they'd won this game, they're this, and this? If they'd beaten the Edmonton Elks, if they'd beaten the Tigers.
Oh, sure. But I mean, they were leading that game and they gave away the lead.
Yeah, it was a bad pass by.
It's not like the Roughriders were playing. Were just trounced in touchdown Atlantic. That was a game they were well positioned to win, and true to form, they did not. So, that we've talked about the pool of quarterbacks, but just as important and perhaps more importantly, offensive line. How do you rebuild that? Who do you even bring back from that group?
Dan Clark.
I think Dan Clark, if healthy, and Logan Furlan, that's
about it. Evan Johnson's got to improve a whole lot of stuff.
And you cannot bring the tackles back.
No.
And you need depth.
Yeah.
Aside from that, that's an area of strength.
Logan Bandy can come back. I think he can re-sign.
Yeah, but you don't start Logan Bandy. Yeah. I mean, he did he really helped them out in a pinch, but they were starting him way ahead of what the timetable would have dictated. They're going to have the 3rd overall pick in the draft, so they obviously pick an offensive lineman there. I don't think they need another Canadian receiver not to play. So
they don't even have guys they can trade to pick up off other offensive linemen either.
And the thing is too, if their team's got a good offensive lineman, they're going to keep them.
Yeah, no one's going to trade.
Right? I mean, so you've got and I'm not sure free agency is going to be the solution there by and large, because then you incur some cap issues. What they've got to do is, they've got to draft well, and they've got to go out and find, via basic player recruitment, a pair of tackles principally. That means American players, and that's Jeremy O'Day, that's Paul Jones, that's Kyle Carson. They've got the player personnel side of this organization has got to find 2 tackles that don't leave us talking about Andrew Lauderdale in retrospect. Don't leave us talking about Natai Rogers in retrospect.
And it's funny when you see the names of the tackles that sign, you read their backgrounds. It doesn't really prove anything till they get on the field. because no matter how deep their resume goes and how astounding it looks, they still got to play to the Canadian game, and some of them just may never adapt. So
no, but I mean, once upon a time, there are tackles who can come here.
Every
and do
team
that.
has two.
Once upon a time, somebody found Stanley Bryant. In fact, he almost ended up here once upon a time. So they've got to rectify the tackle situation. I think their interior linemen, they could probably get by with a majority of what they have, but they've got to address the depth and they've got to address the tackles, because otherwise it's going to be open season on the quarterback again. And then it won't matter if the quarterback is Bo Levi Mitchell, or Bo Horvat. They're going to you'll probably get the same production if there isn't an offensive line.
Yeah, that's very true. What about the defense, Rob? Should we keep talking about offensive line, receivers. We talk about how the drop off in play after that Ottawa game due to injuries. A lot of it was due to injuries. Some of it was due to performances by certain players, like Nick Marshall. I think is a free agent. Mike Edem is one of them. They got some pretty big names coming out there. Darnell Sankey.
Yeah.
Some of these big names are going to be out there in defense, and it's going to cost money to bring them back. And do they have that kind of?
They're going to need to get they're going to need to get a pass rush that is reminiscent of what they had early this season. Yeah. And then AC Leonard, now he was playing hurt, but they didn't get $200,000 worth of production of AC Leonard. Mm-hmm. A healthy Pete Robertson for an entire year would be beneficial. A healthy Anthony Lanier II for an entire year would be hugely beneficial. They need to get the kind of push that they had early in the year. Early in the year, they were as porous as the offensive line was revealed to be pretty much from the outset. The Roughriders were able to exert more pressure than was applied on them. And then as soon as that balance shifted, the elevator cable snapped. So they showed last season that they can find a good defensive lineman, and they can exert pressure. Injuries played a role. Lack of discipline played a role. But the defensive line's got to be an area. It's got to be a priority, and they've got to find some defensive backs who can actually intercept a pass.
What did they have
aside from Nick Marshall
and Moncrief?
But he's not. He's technically a linebacker. So aside from Nick Marshall, Roland Milligan had one pick and Mike Edem had one pick, and that was on a Hail Mary in week 2 in Edmonton. So there's just no ball hawking in that secondary aside from Nick Marshall. And say what you want about Nick Marshall, and occasionally he gets beat over the top, but he will also make the other team pay for throwing in his vicinity from time to time. They need some defensive backs who can actually make an interception, actually make plays on the ball, because by and large, they didn't have that. Part of that is influenced by the defensive line and the lack of pressure as the season evolved, and that exacerbates the challenges facing the defensive backs. But they need somebody out there who reminds me of Steve Dennis. Just wanted to throw that name out there. I always like Steve Dennis. So.
Well, even Ed Gainey.
Say what you want about a lot of people were picking Ed Gainey apart in his latter years in terms of the critics, but Ed Gainey was a good defensive back here, a very good defensive back here. One day we'll be in the Plaza of Honor, I would think. And there was nobody. Lucius classic. Thank you for mentioning that. I mean, Lucius. A lot was made about various other areas of the team, but Lucius Purifoy ends up having an all-star season after leaving Saskatchewan, and they didn't have anybody who gave them what Lucius Purifoy gave them in previous years.
Not that versatility and everything, and just the leadership, from his funny little thing with the it doll to everything he was on the field. Everything he was on the field with the Lions, and good for Lucius. He's the type of player you kind of we want to see him do well, because he works so hard and he has that versatility that you don't really see as much anymore. And that was a big loss. Can they bring him back? I'm not quite sure. I think I've looked at some. I'm assuming just about everybody's under 1-year deals. I think it's more of a rarity that the rookies and stuff. So there's going to be a lot of free agents available at other positions. I just wonder how many free agents will be available at offensive line, which was the issue heading into 2022. There weren't a lot of great offensive linemen to bolster your team after you spent your money on Duke Williams. And
they can't fix the entire offensive line via free agency, because then the cap will be an issue. They've got to find and develop some players.
Some 65,000 a year guys.
Some guys who are closer to the minimum wage. That's the reality of the Canadian Football League, especially if you look at what are they going to have to pay for a quarterback in a year where where there's a lot more demand than there is supply. So you're probably going to end up overpaying for your quarterback, whoever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the Grey Cup for a bit. I
Well,
believe the Argonauts won 24-23.
did they? And probably the most pretty boring 3 quarters.
No, the Janarian Grant
Yeah,
punt
that came
return
with-
kind
it
of
started- that started to
electrified
fire
the
up.
game,
Yeah,
and then it was a very captivating
punt return,
spectacle
2
after
block
that.
punts, 2 block,
Two block
field
field goals.
goals and stuff, all in the last few minutes of the game, and it just.
When was the last time before that we even saw a blocked field goal attempt at Mosaic Stadium? I'm trying to remember. I think there were 2 all year during the regular season period, and then 2 on back-to-back plays.
And you and I both leaned pretty heavily towards the Bombers winning that, but I was kept telling people there was a difference between the teams, but it was about this much difference. It wasn't this margin of a difference, but the Bombers had the edge in almost every category. And then here come the Argos, who I thought was funny. I don't remember who made the quote, but I think it was Henoch Mwamba. Mentioned they were battling on the sidelines. They had all sorts of controversies. They had internal strife. Remember Pinball Clements had to come down from the GM's box to separate some, I think it was Brandon Banks or something like that. And all of a sudden, boom, they're the team that their quarterback, the guy we all talked to, we couldn't understand because we didn't see what happened to Bethel McLeod Thompson when he hit his thumb. I didn't see that part. But we always just thought it was because he wasn't doing that well. And boom, Chad Kelly comes in and lights him up and throws another name into the quarterback pile. But boy, got to give the Argos credit. Their defense, their defensive line was just, and I'm not saying that Winnipeg's defensive line struggled, but they just seem to.
No,
they
struggled.
They struggle. They have so much more pressure.
Winnipeg, Toronto had 4 sacks, and there was a 5th that was called back due to face masking, and Corey Mace did a terrific job for the. Yeah, Corey Mace had a better game than Buck Pierce did.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you're looking at coaching nuts and bolts, that was certainly apparent. I don't know why Dakota Prukop was throwing a long pass when your starting quarterback has just been named the league's most outstanding player for the 2nd year in a row.
I didn't understand the Prukop use. I didn't get that
either. I just there's a time to be cute, but that's week 4 of the regular season or in the preseason. It's not in the Grey Cup, and the Bombers played like a team that just didn't seem to appreciate where they were.
Brady Oliveira did.
They were in terms of they're in a Grey Cup, and this is just it's no time for gadgetry when you're playing a team with a defense like Toronto that was playing like it did that day. Yeah. You if you're going to throw the ball deep, you do it with your best guy. You don't do it with Dakota Prukop, and that's the Grey Cup isn't a time for that. That especially the 4th quarter of a Grey Cup game. You just dispense with that. They got a little too cute at a time when they think they should have the magnitude of the situation should have precluded them doing what they did. And Toronto was able to play free and easy because nobody expected them to win. So there we have it. The 4th Regina-based Grey Cup game is complete. I think in terms of the quality of the game, the best Grey Cup by people who remember 2013, which is pretty much everybody, may disagree. But in terms of a game that went down to the wire, that's the first one and first Grey Cup in Regina that did. So the best ending of a Regina-based Grey Cup. And speaking of endings, we are done. For how long, we don't know. We will return as events and circumstances dictate with the Roughriders. So I would think within a couple of weeks we'll reconvene for a offensive coordinator-oriented edition of Rider Rumblings. I'd like to offer some thanks, first of all, and principally to Murray McCormick for all the help he's provided and insight he's provided this year. We had numerous special guests. I would like to thank them all as well, including Jeff Fairholm twice, Britt Dort, Daryl Davis, Jeff DeDecker. We were very, very lucky to have some terrific guests this year. To our producers, Austin Davis and Creedon Martell, thank you so much for putting up with our fuzzy appearances, occasionally fuzzy audio, and getting this out to the public. And of course, Craig Reynolds was also a guest. I'd like to thank him. We had Jeremy O'Day on during the off season, and principally, I'd like to thank everybody who spent this time with us during the year. We really appreciate the time that Rough Rider fans and CFL fans have invested in the feedback we've received, and we really enjoy doing this, and we look forward to doing it again until we're both 98 years old. That'll be. And if you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Vanstone. Murray is Murray at Murray LP. Again, my thanks, and we look forward to chatting with you soon. Hopefully, there'll be a little less chin next time we do that. Take care and enjoy this wonderful winter of ours.